And if we can come to you, Paul White, obviously lockdowns had a major issue on transport, and bus passenger transport levels haven't gone up to pre-COVID levels as yet. So how do you think that's affected trends in air pollution, what's happened over the last few years? And obviously there's been a shift to more electric vehicles as well. Perhaps you can give us a context as to what you think that is doing to improve air quality.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I think we saw some trends through COVID and through the pandemic and lockdowns where you didn't have the same level of car traffic. Cars were off the road, people were in lockdown, but there was essentially a bus network still running for lifeline services to get key workers to the places of work. And we saw how bus can operate in the absence of congestion, and you had improved running times, lower operating costs, and as lockdowns were removed and people started to come back, they returned to their car, and there's still a remnant of a fear about public transport remaining from maybe some of the messaging that we had around avoiding enclosed spaces through the pandemic. So congestion bounces back, and we see a real return to vehicles, even more modern vehicles. I think we should take a place-based approach. But if you look at a technology approach where if you look at replacing an older vehicle with a Euro 6, the newest version of diesel, or a zero-emission bus, you're still limiting its ability, its capacity to operate cleanly if you're stuck in traffic. So I think a major trend has been the bounce back from congestion. As a sector, yes, we still have the impact of the pandemic. Limiting patronage is still below where it was pre-pandemic. And clearly in the cost of living crisis, the costs are up, and we're struggling to get that balance right between providing a network of services that are attractive to people, so they will leave the car at home and use public transport. And so in funds like the Bus Partnership Fund, where we can invest in bus priority measures and free bus from congestion, and hopefully return to that sort of, maybe not the exact freedom that we saw through the pandemic, but freeing bus from congestion will lower emissions and improve the offering that people look for when they're making their travel choices.
Can I just ask how closely your organisation monitors the emission changes by shift from older vehicles to more modern carbon reduction energy uses?
There are set, if you look at the different Euro standards of engine, you can look at how the pollutants associated with those Euro standards, going from older vehicles, Euro 3 vehicles, down to Euro 6, so a much more cleaner engine. But I can't talk with any degree of certainty about the performance of those engines, as it is somewhat linked to their ability to perform. So a vehicle that's running at a set speed and is not having the stop-start that you might associate with urban travel will have a different emissions performance, so I can't.
I'm very grateful. Paul White, you won't be surprised that following that answer I'm going to come to you with the next question, which is that the Confederation of Passenger Transport have highlighted in your submission that CAFS2 recognises the importance of the modal shift that we've been hearing about. But in your view, first of all, are the timescales and the modelling that I put to Stuart Hay earlier sufficient to achieve what you would like to see, or what the CPT would like to see? And do you recognise, given the answer we've just heard from Gavin Thompson, that lack of joined-up thinking? And if so, what needs to happen?
I think, as Gavin's pointed out, I won't go over Gavin's answer, but I think within CAFS2 and the actions in the strategy, I do recognise that there are a number there that haven't seen enough progress since the publication of the document that I would like progress on. I'd like Transport Scotland to be more aligned to achieving those goals. And we do have a bus partnership fund which would deliver bus priority measures, as I previously stated, that would hopefully deliver patronage growth, that kind of modal shift to bus, which is a key part of providing an attractive transport network for people to consider. We've spent, I think, 25 million of the £500 million budget since, well, I think the scheme was initially launched 2019 and then relaunched in 2021, so we've not really got far enough in delivering that scheme. I haven't seen much progress on the managed motorway project, which should be prioritising high occupancy vehicles in the trunk road network, and that falls under the remit of Transport Scotland, so you'd think that would be an exemplar project. public sector buildings and their sort of travel plans for employees to encourage public transport solutions, again, is one we're struggling to get data from what progress there has been on that. So there are a number of things within CAS too, which I think could really help shift the dial in making people consider their transport options more carefully, and also to improve the bus and just the general public transport offering. So I'm not sure, does that answer your question?
I'm very grateful, Paul. Thank you. Great.
My next question is to Paul, and it's regarding the alignment with the wider transport policies, you know, the investment in public transport and active travel. How do you think that, how effective is that in regards to the LEZs?
I think you're right to point that it was our view that there was a slight misalignment in terms of the LEZ introduced standards based on a Euro 6 diesel engine, which operators have now worked strides to comply with, and we are in a good position across the 4 LEZs to meet those targets. And that was with the help to a degree from Scottish Government through what's called the Bus Emission Abatement Retrofit Fund. So the Government did cover the cost of fitting emission abatement equipment to some buses, and some have been replaced. But then quite quickly following that, we have hit a programme for government target to decarbonise half the bus fleet by the end of this year, which is not a target I think we will hit, but it's good to have an ambitious target. But you have a sector who has maybe invested to a degree in new diesel vehicles to meet LEZ standards, and is then faced with then meeting targets for zero emission vehicles, where the average lifespan of a bus is 13 years. So if you are curtailing that, if you're asking for operators to invest twice, that's a degree of misalignment.
A specific question.
Yeah, just a quick supplementary to Paul White. Dr Fuller said that LEZ should be designed with reference to the buses that would be using the area. Do you think Scotland's LEZs have been designed adequately to reflect the buses that would use the LEZ?
Well, buses were first targeted. So, for example, if we look at the Glasgow scheme, the target of compliance has moved up in bands of 20% over a number of years to reach 100%, and that is helpful for the operator, because I think if you're faced with a situation where you're told you have a target to reach and you have a grace period of 2 years, 3 years, whatever, you would have to think about well, how do I meet this new target if I have a whole fleet that has to change, or a part of the fleet that has to change. The levers I can pull are remove the non-compliant vehicles from that, and then reduce services that maybe are very important for people as they enter the LEZ area, or do I have to increase fares to generate the revenue to invest in the fleet renewal that has to take place? So a scaled approach over a number of years has been helpful in allowing operators to meet the target in Glasgow, and we've had a good number of years' notice of the other schemes and a good idea, if maybe not full clarity, about what they would look like. So operators have managed to adjust and are in a good position for the 4 LEZs. What I would maybe add is that if you are saying to the public that there's going to be these areas where you may not be able to access through your car, and you want to make the public transport options as attractive as possible, and I would have liked to have seen, rather than ring-fencing investment that's generated from the scheme to improve public transport or road space allocation, a degree of that coming in at the same time as you're imposing those limits on bus, so that by the start of the scheme you have a public transport network that is reliable, punctual, more reliable, more punctual, more affordable, rather than hoping to maybe get there through revenue generated from the scheme at a later stage.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was interested to look at the £500 million bus infrastructure fund that was announced about 3 years ago, and it was to think about work that's sort of in mind for improving bus journey time reliability, particularly around the M8 in the Glasgow area. It looks like this sort of business plan and design development's taken a few years. I know there's been COVID, but have you got any insight, Paul, on how important is that work to encourage people to leave the car behind and get on the bus?
Yes, trying to be as quick as possible. Work is underway through a partnership with Glasgow City Council operators and other stakeholders to identify where these projects, where these pinch points are that should be tackled and how we improve that. We're putting in bids. I'd say that these bids then have to go through the STAG process, the Transport Appraisal Guidance, which seems quite a burdensome process. I would like to see that, if possible, streamlined, because these are projects that are really key to getting the benefits on the ground that will encourage people to leave the car behind. So anything that could be done to improve that process would be welcomed.
No, that's fine. That'll do. Thank you. I'm not upset.